Hi there, and welcome to A Song of Ice and Fire Explained. This is a video series where we explain the massive conspiracies going on in A Song of Ice and Fire. If you haven't seen our previous videos, we suggest watching those first. So let's continue on with Daenerys 4, A Game of Thrones. This chapter is 3,842 words long. In this Daenerys chapter, the khalasar enters Vast Dothrak. As they ride up the God's Way, Daenerys discusses the pros and cons of Dothraki combat skills with Ser Jorah Mormont. Once they have settled in, Daenerys invites Viserys to sup with her and makes a peace offering of new clothes. He becomes angry and grabs her. She hits him hard with a belt and threatens him with Drogo's Blood Riders. The khalasar enters Vast Dothrak under the Mother of Mountains and proceeds along the God's Way, passing under the gigantic Horse Gate, a pair of rearing bronze stallions whose hooves meet 100 feet up. Daenerys wonders why Vast Dothrak needs a gate when it appears to have no walls, no buildings, and no people. All that Daenerys can see are ancient monuments that the Dothraki have sacked over the centuries in the grass on either side of the God's Way. As she looks back at her brother Viserys, who is now mounted again, Daenerys thinks back on the events of the long ride east. After the incident on the Dothraki Sea, Viserys had been forced to walk, and the Dothraki had named him Khal Rhaenyra, the Sorefoot King. Viserys did not realize that he was being mocked. When he accepted a ride in a cart from Khal Drogo, which earned him another name, Khal Rhaegat, the Cart King. Daenerys had begged Ser Jorah not to tell Viserys the truth, and only after much pleading had she convinced Drogo to allow Viserys to ride again. Now, as they ride past the broke idols of fallen cities, Viserys tells Daenerys that all the Dothraki savages can do is steal things better men have built and kill, which is all he needs them for. He goes on to say the Dothraki cannot speak the language of civilized men, and then states that he is tired of waiting for Drogo to give him his army. Ser Jorah tells Viserys that Drogo will honor his promise in his own time. Fortunately, few of the Dothraki can understand the common tongue. After Viserys leaves, Ser Jorah explains that the Dothraki are not merchant and do not trade, despite what Viserys thinks. Khal Drogo considers Daenerys a gift, and will eventually give a gift in return. Daenerys points out that it is not right to make her brother wait, and says Viserys believes he can sweep the Seven Kingdoms with 10,000 Dothraki. Ser Jorah snorts that Viserys could not sweep a stable with 10,000 brooms. Daenerys asks whether it would be possible for someone stronger than Viserys. Ser Jorah tells her that when he first came to Essos, he saw the Dothraki as half-naked barbarians and believed that 1,000 good knights could put 100 times as many Dothraki to flight. Now, he is not so sure. The Dothraki are better riders, their bows, wielded from horseback, have a longer range, and there are so many of them. Drogo alone commands 40,000 men, the same number that Rhaegar brought to the Battle of the Trident, and only a tenth of Rhaegar's men were knights. When Rhaegar died, many fled the field, and such a rabble would not last long against 40,000 Dothraki. However, the Dothraki have no patience for sieges, and if the armies of Westeros stayed beyond their castle walls, they could hold out forever. Robert Baratheon might be fool enough to give them battle, but the men around him are not. Stannis Baratheon, Tywin Lannister, and Eddard Stark. The way he says the last name leads Daenerys to ask if Ser Jorah hates the man. Ser Jorah replies that Eddard Stark took everything he loved from him for a few lice-ridden poachers and his precious honor. They arrive at the city, which is both the largest and the smallest Daenerys has ever seen. It sprawls ancient, arrogant, and empty across the plain. The buildings are all different. Ser Jorah explains that they are built by slaves in the fashion they were familiar with. He also explains that the only permanent residents are the Dosh Khaleen, the widows of all the cows who have come before. Yet Vaes Dothrak is large enough to house all the khalasars if they should all return at once, as is prophesized. When they near the eastern market and dismount, each rider gives up all his weapons to a waiting slave, for in Vast Dothrak, no man may carry steel or spill blood. The palace of Khal Drogo is a massive feasting hall of rough-hewn logs that make a wall 40 feet tall with a roof of silk surrounded by horse yards and hundreds of earthen houses. Daenerys is met by Collio, one of Khal Drogo's blood riders, who informs her that Drogo must ascend the Mother of Mountains that night to sacrifice for his safe return. As Daenerys speaks to Collio, she recalls that the Cow's 3 blood riders are his sworn brothers, who share everything with him except his horses. Daenerys is glad that Drogo does not hold to the tradition of sharing her with his blood riders, because some of them frighten her. Blood riders are bound to their cow for life and die when he dies, living only long enough to avenge him if required. Daenerys finds herself wishing her father was guided by such men, remembering the stories of the Kingslayer who murdered her father and Sir Barristan Selmy who went over to the usurper. Daenerys, who is tiring easily as her child grows, is looking forward to a night of rest. She is led to one of the hollow hills that has been prepared for her. She decides to give her brother his gifts tonight. She has prepared Viserys several set of clothes that she hopes will help earn the respect of the Dothraki. She also intends the gifts as a way of apologizing for shaming him. Daenerys orders Doreah to invite him to supper and Irri to go to the market to buy something other than horse meat, which Viserys hates. Viserys soon arrives, dragging Doreah by the arm, furious that Daenerys would presume to give him commands. Daenerys attempts to explain that Doreah misspoke, then shows Viserys the clothes she has had made for him. Viserys only sneers at the clothes, calling them Dothraki rags. Her brother goes on to ridicule her for presuming to dress him, and suggests spitefully that next Daenerys will want to braid his hair. Daenerys declares that he has no right to a braid, because he has won no victories. Viserys grabs her by the arm, hurting her, and for a moment, Daenerys is a scared little girl again. Then she grabs hold of the first thing she touches, a medallion belt she meant to give Viserys, and swings it with all her strength. The belt hits her brother full in the face and leaves a deep cut. Daenerys tells Viserys to leave and pray that Drogo does not hear of this. Viserys leaves in a fury, telling her that when he comes into his kingdom, she will regret this day. And this is where Daenerys 4, A Game of Thrones ends. This chapter definitely builds on the last chapter, with Daenerys coming into her own as not just an extension of Viserys, but her own person with her own agenda. Lastly, it is a little suspicious how Doreah misunderstood Daenerys' request as an order, since she has been with Daenerys long enough to know she wouldn't ever order her brother to do anything, and she even said, "Doreah, run and find him and invite him to sup with me." This chapter also foreshadows the possibility of the Dothraki one day becoming one Khalasar under the control of Daenerys in the Winds of Winter. And that's about it for Daenerys 4, A Game of Thrones. In the next video, we'll cover Bran 5 and continue from there. Now, here are the differences between the HBO TV show and book. In the show, Jorah doesn't seem to hate Lord Eddard Stark, while in the book, he spits at the mention of his name. Lastly, in the show, Daenerys and Jorah don't have as many conversations about how utterly incapable Viserys would be at retaking the Seven Kingdoms. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. If you want to see more of A Song of Ice and Fire Explained, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, when you get the chance, try out Fantasy Flight's A Game of Thrones board game, digital edition.